What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls? Joker back again, once again, and so Anthem is more or less already out. People are playing it, reviewing it, and others are wondering, is it worth it? So I really wanted this game to be good, if for no other reason than maybe, just maybe, the thought of having some actual competition might finally get Bungie to get off their asses and do Destiny justice. Eventually. One day. Hopefully. Yeah, this ain't it. Let's go ahead and start from the ground up, because there's a handful of things I think people need to be aware of going into Anthem. These are my first impressions, and a more fleshed out review is currently in the works. Anthem is a third-person looter shooter. And over the course of playing, over the course of doing research, I've yet to see a piece of loot, especially a gun, where I've been like, oh, holy crap, I need this! And there's a general consensus that guns kinda suck in Anthem, and that the only thing that really matters is your supers and your other abilities. Now, maybe I'm insane, but I don't think that's okay. I mean, think about it. The general consensus has veered towards the idea that half of the loot is irrelevant in the game. That's not a good place to be. And customization really seems to be tied more to the javelins than anything else. Like, I've seen some really nice looking javelins, but outside of that, the loot system seems pretty stagnant, with a lot of the loot in the game being what I would call invisible loot. Loot that doesn't do anything to affect the appearance of your character, but it's just an icon in a menu with some stats attached to it. Think the mods in Warframe, but even then, the mods in Warframe are presented way better. Here it looks like the design team in Anthem decided to do as little work as possible and recycle as much content as they could. You'll see the same handful of symbols for most, if not all, of your invisible loot, over and over and over and over and over. Doesn't matter the rarity. There's no style, there's no flair, it's just there to get the job done, and it does that. It's very utilitarian. Which is what a lot of this game is, very utilitarian. The weapons, as far as I can tell, and I could be mistaken, at this point offer the same utilitarian approach. There's not much diversity in the models. One auto rifle looks largely like another auto rifle. One automatic pistol looks largely like another automatic pistol. One shotgun? Well, you get the point. There's, of course, slight differences, a tchotchke here, a slightly different paint job there, but really, at the end of the day, it's nothing to write home about. You're also going to be using a lot of the same gear, as one of the facets of the crafting system is that you use your gear over and over and over and over and over to complete challenges, so you can unlock better versions of that exact same gear. This reuse of gear and the utilitarian nature of the design of the weapons would probably not be such a bad issue if the loot itself wasn't boring. You'll get a legendary or a masterwork piece of gear, and it'll have stats that are like 15% ammo drop rate, 18% more shotgun ammo, 10% more ammo pickup, 3% more damage. Mind you, this is on endgame loot. This isn't some mid-tier rare blue or green. This is endgame loot, and it's boring. These lackluster, boring stat buffs are probably why a lot of the weapons feel so meh. If you get a weapon, you get your first endgame piece of loot, and it's a masterwork or it's a legendary, and it says you get 3% more damage, 10% more ammo pickup, 18% more shotgun ammo, 15% more ammo drop rate. You're not really going to notice that. That's not really going to feel good. So, Anthem is a looter where most of its loot is invisible, repetitive, or boring. And really, the only time you notice any cosmetic changes in the gear is when you kit out your javelin, which, to be fair, does have some fairly extensive customization. It's actually one of the upsides of the game. I really enjoy going in and tinkering with the way my javelin looks. But one must wonder why. Javelin customization seems to be the most comprehensive form of customization in this game. Whatever could it be? The world may never know. But, moving forward. Now, if the loot system was a mild annoyance, What I'm about to talk about are design choices that boggle the mind and leave me utterly stupefied. Like, somebody came up with these ideas, thought they were good, presented them to a team and their superiors. These ideas were greenlit, tested, alpha tested, beta tested, and at no point, no one at any rung of the ladder said, you know what, these aren't really great ideas. These don't really add to the game. In fact, they kind of get in the player's way and subtract from the game. Nope, that level of self-awareness never graced this development team. At the beginning of the video, we talked about how the loot can be boring, invisible, or repetitive. But it's a looter shooter. And when you get those high-end masterwork or legendary drops, you get excited. You want to see your loot. Except, you fucking can't, because you don't have a player inventory. So, if you want to take a look at that new shiny piece of loot you just got, well, buckle up, ladies and gents, boys and girls, freelancers of all ages, because you're about to take a ride. Now, this is actually as sped up as Sony Vegas will allow me to do it, and I wanted to put the whole thing here because I wanted you to see that there's no trickery going on. This is ridiculous, isn't it? And remember, this is sped up. This isn't what it actually takes to get into the game. So this feeling of annoyance that you're feeling, imagine that in real time. It's just loading, 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 loading. And they don't even have like an interesting loading screen. It's just concept art. So to go from the tower to free play, it's about 2 minutes, 4 seconds. Fine, whatever. So you go out and you want to get loot because that's the point of the game. And you find some loot. Da, 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 da. Now, can you A, go into a menu and equip this loot Destiny style, B, pick it up and equip it right there, as seen in the E3 demo.
Oh, come on. Be something good. Oh, yes! Jer's Wrath.
Oh, nice.
Or C, load all the way back into the tower, go all the way to the forge, and load all the way into the menu, then equipped it, and then load all the way back out into free play. Like, this is ridiculous. This is absurdity. This is just categorically bad game design. You wouldn't have to go through this. You wouldn't have to load into a menu to load into a menu to load into another menu if you just had a player inventory. Imagine that. And just think about how disruptive this is, right? Like, you get your first really super special, awesome masterwork weapon, and you're excited. Now, of course you don't get to see what it is because they can't be bothered to tell you what item you got. It just says, item. So, you get your first masterwork item, or you get your first legendary item, and you're super excited to see what it is, and then you have to go through this too, and then the game crashes. Womp, womp, womp. So if you look at it from the point of view of, I just got this really cool drop, how long does it take me to get back to the fort, equipped it, then get back to my friends? You're looking at about 4 minutes round trip. To do something that should take 5 seconds. This is just categorically unacceptable. Who thought that this was a good idea? Who thought that not giving the players an inventory was a good idea? Because it would be rather hypocritical of me to not point out that Destiny has really egregious loading times as well. And they just keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse with every subsequent DLC. Destiny's saving grace, however, is that I don't have to load back into the tower every time I want to change a piece of gear. I just open up my menu and wham bam, thank you ma'am! I have a new piece of gear equipped. And if I don't have something that's in my inventory, say it's in my vault, I can just use a companion app to move that to my inventory so then I can equip it. Not quite sure you're going to be able to do that with Anthem. And yet, ladies and gents, boys and girls, freelancers of all ages, somehow, some way, that manages to not be the worst part of this game. Oh no, for you see, someone decided that story missions needed join-in-progress matchmaking. I'll save you the visual example, but basically what happens is select mission, long loading screen, joins a squad already in progress, but you're outside of the mission area, teleports to teammates, another long loading screen, misses important lore explanation, outside of mission area, teleports to team, long loading screen, misses more lore. And God forbid you ever go down in this game, because let me tell you, If you do it during a cutscene, just before a cutscene, and somebody doesn't get to you to revive you, well, you're not gonna see that cutscene. Worse, however, yes, worse, it does somehow manage to get even worse. Say, for example, you go down, and your teammate's AFK, or they're just being a jerk and they're not reviving you, or something happens. You're down until you're revived. And that would be bad in and of itself. But you can't access the menus. You can't leave the game. You can't do anything. When you're down, the game goes, ha ha, go fuck yourself. The only way to get out of a mission where you're just not getting revived is to hard quit the game. But wait, it gets even better. If you use the quick play option to matchmake, you might be in for one hell of an unwanted surprise, because the quick play option can load low-level players, we're talking level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, into the final mission. Yeah, big oof. It would be one thing if these were all bugs or glitches, but these are design choices. Somebody sat down and decided that forcing players to go back to the tower every single time they wanted to change their loot was a good idea. Someone decided that not only was it a good idea to have join in progress for story missions, but it was a great idea to allow the algorithm to match players too underleveled for that activity or with players at the end of missions. Those are all design choices, and they're fucking terrible. And this is before we get into things like whatever the fuck this effect is. No game should make you feel sick when you play it. This makes me feel sick. I absolutely hate going to the tower in Anthem, which we've already covered in my original thoughts video, but god damn, I didn't think it'd make it into the game. Oh, fuck me, dude. This is horrible. Especially with as much time as you actually have to spend in the tower. Fuck. Underwater still sucks, by the way. It's just as bad. Yes, there's some underwater controls and adjusting them kind of helps, but it's still unbearable. It's still probably one of the worst parts of the game. The open world is boring and drab and lifeless. Like, look at me flying around. Where's the enemies? Where's the wildlife? Where's shit like this?
The world of Anthem is hostile, and threats can come from any direction. It's a dynamic world where the unexpected is around every corner.
I'm not sure we want to use all our supplies on this guy.
Yeah, he seems like a problem for another day.
Speaking of comparisons that I'll inevitably get bitched out about because, but Joker, it doesn't matter that the E3 demo says actual gameplay. Did you really expect the demo in the game to be anything alike? Now, you probably think that that's me making a straw man or being hyperbolic, but I'm not. There will be people that make that argument. I've been doing this long enough to be able to tell you that with a certainty. I've never really understood arguments like this, or arguments where people take any legitimate concern or critique that you may have for something because they have personally decided to build up a mythology around it and have convinced themselves that it's the best thing since sliced bread. So because they've built up this mythology, there can't be anything wrong with the game. What's wrong is you, and you're just a mindless hater. In the case of Anthem, and the clear graphical and gameplay downgrades, this isn't BioWare's first rodeo. This isn't even their first RPG, or their first open world game, or even their first MMO type game. Though Anthem's not an MMO. At best, it's a cooperative looter shooter. The point that I'm getting to is, BioWare as a company, BioWare as a group of teams, BioWare as people that make games like this all the time, understand the limitations of the technology. So when they overpromise and underdeliver, that's not my fault for pointing it out. That's their fault for overpromising and underdelivering. Now, I could harp on about how bad the character models look, or how inconsistent the modeling is. You have your story characters, which look really good, and then you have everyone else, and it's all downhill from there. Like, what happened to this chick, or these models, or this dude? I don't know what happened, but we are certainly lesser for having lost this version of the mechanic. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But hey, moving forward. I'm not going to get into the story too much here, because I'll save that for my spoiler review where I cover the story beat for beat. What I will say is, This story really loves to put the player on the plot railroad and spew exposition for long periods of time. The beginning of the game, for example, it takes about 5 minutes before you actually get control of your character. And to be fair, not all of that is story and exposition. A lot of it's loading screens because, oh boy, loading screens. This game should retitle itself Loading Screen Simulator 2019. Another story cinematic, when you're not too terribly far into the game, lasts for about 6 minutes. This story cinematic is there basically to tell you about some of the events in the past and who the big bad is. And I couldn't help but get the feeling that if Bioware just trusted their player base to be somewhat intelligent, this cinematic would have been half as long. Because it's not an overly intelligent or overly compelling explanation. It's just a really dumbed down, okay, let's make sure that everybody, anyone who ever watches this, understands exactly what's going on in no uncertain terms, in the dumbest way possible we can explain it. And yet, even though this is one of the most dumbed down stories I've ever seen, think the campaign of Destiny 2 and you are dangerously close to spoilers. This story also thinks it's the greatest thing in the world and deserves to waste your fucking time. There's no nuance in the way that this story is told. And sometimes things just happen because plot. Like one of the main plot twists literally just comes out of nowhere. And I can't help but think that there was a version of this story where that plot twist didn't happen if you followed XYZ steps like in a traditional Bioware game, but they took all of that out. Any dialogue choices you make are purely superfluous. The story is very paint by numbers, and thankfully there's only a couple of these large exposition dumps. But if you've come here for classic Bioware storytelling, prepare to be severely disappointed. The campaign as a whole is only slightly better than Destiny 2's. And, well, they basically have the exact same ending, only the serial numbers have been filed off. I wish that was me being hyperbolic, but no, literally, it's the exact same ending. After watching the live action teaser for Anthem, I thought that some of that might be in the game, that some of that might be the story. That looked like a really interesting world that we were presented. Alas, as jumbled and disoriented as that teaser was, making it come off like the story was much bigger and more complex than they could boil down to a 3-minute teaser, it showed a lot of interesting ideas. You know, things that make up classic Bioware storytelling. The reality of the game, however, is very different, and not in a good way. And honestly, Anthem is much lesser for not having a well thought out classic narrative-driven Bioware story. What we do get is serviceable, but it's nothing to write home about. That said, you know what? At least some of the NPCs are likable, though a few of them are a little too quirky for the sake of being quirky.
The sexy danger, sexy bad choices, probably more sexy danger.
But he started peeing blood yesterday, so he's gonna have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, he probably should.
Hey, does this look like it's infected?
People walk and stop wherever they please. This causes stoppages, bumping, and even pedestrian rage.
Isn't it?
I don't associate much with freelancers.
Okay.
Or anyone not a sentinel, really.
Well, I hope you don't regret getting to know one of us.
Yes, me too.
But at least not Ikora, not Zavala, and not Cade are really well done. They're really interesting, and when they have hangups, when they have interpersonal problems, they at least have a reason for it. That said, the NPCs are just kinda serviceable, which is sad because this is a Bioware game. All in all, Anthem feels really unfinished, in that very same way that almost every shared world looter shooter seems unfinished. It's shipping at 75% of the way done, and the community, if one builds up around it, will be the one left holding the bag to beta test it until it resembles something like a fully featured game. Again, think The Division, think Destiny. To say I'm disappointed with Anthem would be an understatement. This game, in my opinion, had way more potential than Destiny, having years and years and years to learn from other developers' mistakes. And yet, here we are, watching it implement those exact same mistakes. And it's sad because I absolutely love a lot of stuff about this game. I love flying, I love the combo system, I love the art design, the sound design. I love I absolutely love playing my Javelin, playing the Interceptor, being this beautiful ballerina of blades and death. I really wanted Anthem to be the next big thing. I really wanted it to give Destiny a run for its money. I really wanted this to be a game where I could sink 1,000 hours into it. But there's just simply not enough here. And what is there tends to lean towards utilitarian, boring, and uninspired. And that's before we talk about any of the numerous, game-breaking, mind-boggling design choices. These are just my first impressions. This isn't a comprehensive review, even though it might seem like one, and that review will be coming shortly. But if you're wondering if you should get this game day one, or wait 6 months to a year, well, this video's been my opinion. Let me know yours in the comments below, and like always, stay frosty.